I started rhyming just to be somebody. I found out that I already was. Cause can't nobody be free unless we're all free. There's no me and no you, it's just us.
What we would believe is that community change is really the only change that can make a difference. I mean, you look back in history, that's really what has created real meaningful change. And as far as students, I mean, our organization is completely student-led. There's probably only two members of the entire organization who are not college students or high school students. And we hire, pay them, train them to become leaders in their community, and they then come back and become trainers for the next students. And we do trainings for individuals as well as trainings for teachers to create change using students as the main change agent in that.
Yeah. Whoops.
Is it a terrible idea if I pull this mic out? Okay, well, I'll answer and then give that a go. So my context is a school-based one, and specifically in a high-performing charter school. And I'm extremely optimistic about the potential for high-performing schools across Denver and across our country happening within the next 10 years. And the reason is twofold. The first is we're on the bubble of having technology disrupt education in the same way it's disrupted many other industries. Technology and medicine are kind of the last to get there. What that means in reality is that we're going to start to have really, really solid data that paints a very bright picture of what the opportunity gap is for every single kid, for every single community, and for every single school and teacher. What we know is that a great teacher, if you have a top quartile teacher 3 years in a row, your statistic, that will close the opportunity gap, that will close the achievement gap in education. If you have a bottom quartile teacher for 3 years in a row, it is statistically impossible that you will go on to graduate from college. I know it happens, but it's incredibly unlikely. And so we're going to be able to paint a much brighter picture of successful teaching and learning and successful schools, and communities are going to demand success the more that spreads. Oh yeah, here we go. Thank you.
Oh, my own microphone. Is it flipped on? Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, fabulous. So I grew up with the PICO organizing model, and it's all about building relationship and getting the people who are directly impacted by the pain to be a part of creating the solution. So whether that's students, or it's parents, or it's immigrants, or it's dreamers, right? That it's them who are gaining leadership skills and experience to speak for themselves. And so that, I think, is the base. That's how we build community movements, driven movements, is by getting people who are directly impacted to have a seat at the table. And like I tell my students, I wasn't born a public speaker. I didn't, come out of the hospital understanding politics and political structures. It was something that I was taught. And I wasn't necessarily taught in the school setting. I was taught by my organizers. And so I think it's key and crucial that we look at every single one of our members of our community and see them as an asset and see them full of possibility, and then go ahead and coach them and help them to find their own voice. That, I think, for real is how students and constituents are uniquely positioned, because they know what's up. They know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I think we, students particularly, are also able to be very creative and take risks in a way that sometimes adults are hesitant to. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. So I'd love to ask, you all are talking about various constituents within the community. Could you describe a process of creating a collective voice on an issue? How have you banded different voices in the community together to advocate for change?
So I can give an example of like one of the campaigns the Advancement Project and Padres y Jóvenes Unidos has worked on here in Denver, because we work mostly on ending the school-to-prison pipeline, which, as many of you know or not know, are the policies and practices that push students, especially students of color, out of school and into the criminal justice system, both directly and indirectly. And we know here in Denver that one of the reasons why that was happening is because police were playing a really big role in schools. They were arresting students for very minor things, for writing on the wall. We would see students get tickets. We see students get tickets for talking back, that kind of thing. And really, we had to create a message where we realize that police are not disciplinarians. They're there to protect students, keep students safe. They're not there to kick students out of school and create all of these problems, right? And this is something that we've seen especially, and you all know this, like after Newtown happened, the big rush that we saw was to add more police into our schools, right? More guns into our schools. It was really shocking to me to see us always ask for money for arts and for sports and for different enrichment programs. We're never there, but suddenly when we wanted more police in schools, we had money dripping through the walls to try to get that to happen, which is just like unbelievable, right? So we know the money is there. But with regards to this campaign, what was really important, first of all, is to name the issue and to define what was going on, right? Collecting stories of what was happening to students. And I really connected what we're talking about here with students, because these are the things that happen to students. They're the ones who are best able to talk about what's happening to them. And we see this because we work with young people here in Denver. They come to us, they tell us all of these problems that are happening in their schools and what's going on, right? So it's about pulling those folks together and finding common allies in other fields. So throughout this campaign, we worked with folks in the immigration movement who knew that police were also, ICE police were going into schools if they wanted to. We knew the LGBTQ movement, where students of LGBTQ backgrounds were being targeted for this as well. We knew an NAACP background and black students, particularly in neighboring places, were getting affected by this as well, right? So what we need to do is to first name the problem, collect stories on what's happening, and then find our common coalition partners to stand with us in this campaign and in this fight.
I'd love to weigh in on that because this is kind of new territory for us. We were mostly focused on, hey, let's provide a great school and do our business and then move on. But we started seeing parents as a huge lever and our community members as a huge lever to that successful change, and I started to become really concerned. What happens if Yanni, one of our little girls, leaves as a 5-year-old or as a 6-year-old? Sure, she's now advanced as a kindergartner, but she's not going to be able to advocate for herself moving into another successful school. And if Yanni's mom, Princess, if she doesn't know what a successful school looks like, if she doesn't know the communication that she should expect from teachers and from principals, then she won't really, then Yanni will no longer, and Yanni ends up in a bad school, then Yanni's going to lose that progress that she's made with us. And so we started thinking about what does parent engagement mean for us, and we broke it really into three levels of engagement. One is where it's a win to have a student show up on time in uniform every single day, and I would say 3 to 5% of our families are there, and we have very specific strategies to get there. And so when Stefan doesn't come to school, I will drive to Jessica's house and knock on the door and say, hey, Jessica, good morning. I noticed Stefan wasn't in school. Is he feeling okay this morning? And if the answer is no, it's like, oh, okay, have you made a doctor's appointment? Can I help you do that? And if the answer is, yeah, he's feeling okay, we're just tired, it's like, oh, great, let me grab him and take him back. And it doesn't take too many of those visits to make sure Stefan's in school every day. The second level of engagement that we see is parents becoming immersed into our school. And so every one of our families is part of our Family Leadership Council. And that council, that group of parents and community members, said that they created mandatory volunteer hours, 30 hours a year for dual-head families and 15 hours a year for single-head families, because they believe that volunteerism and supporting the school is important for the school and important for the community. The third tier is advocating for successful conditions and for equitable education beyond the walls of our school, so the entire community. So Princess, who's a wonderful woman, she went to a DPS high school. She noticed, and she told me about this, that when she was 15, she noticed that all the black kids were in one classroom in this Denver Public Schools, and all the white kids were in a different classroom. And she told me that in her classroom, they were watching videos most of the time. And sometimes the videos were depicted African Americans in an unfavorable light. And so once she went to the principal to talk about this and say, hey, I have a problem with this. And after that conversation, the principal didn't go and fix the problem. He suspended Princess. So Princess, when she came to Rocky Mountain Prep, she wanted to make sure that Yanni had something very different. And last week, Princess's partner, Yanni's dad, O'Neill, was stabbed. And Princess and Nigea, O'Neill's other daughter, they were up all night. And he was in the hospital for 5 days, and Princess was with him every single day. Those kids missed 4 hours of school. And they were there the rest of the time. And Princess, when she came in, was like, I am so sorry. These girls, were up all night. I really, really needed them to be here, but life got in the way. I'm so sorry about that. The most important thing is for them to be here. And so we started thinking with Princess, and we didn't know, is advocating for change in our community something that our parents are interested in and something they see as powerful? And so I talked to Princess about it, and I said, hey, there's some important stuff happening right now in Colorado. One is Amendment 66, which is the school finance reform. I hope you guys have heard about that. I love the love. Thank you. Yes on 66. And a couple others are school board races that are happening in Denver. And so we asked Princess, is this something that you want to engage in, that you want to learn more about? And she said, if it affects Rocky Mountain Prep, if it affects Yanni's education, please let us know. Please let us get involved. We want to do this work. And so on Thursday night of last week, we had 50 or 60 folks out who were interested in learning more. We had people from Amendment 66 campaign, and we gave information about school board candidates. And Princess was leading the charge there, and they're incredibly excited. We had 100% of them commit to vote on the issues, and many, many more going out to March next week and become more engaged and tell their folks. And so when we thought about how do we create community change, we asked our community, is this something you want to be a part of, and what issues are important to you?
So one of the biggest campaigns that I've ever been a part of was passing our in-state tuition bill, Colorado Asset, which on April 29th of this year, the governor finally signed in front of hundreds of students and advocates and community leaders. I'm not going to say... Right. So, and I always have trouble with that because I know some of our East Coast states have called theirs their DREAM Act, and which is really confusing here in Colorado because the DREAM Act, right, we know it at the federal level legislation. And so then there's all this messaging, confusion about what the DREAM Act is and what asset is and what DACA is, right? Needless to say, there was a lot of confusion in our campaign about how do we message what it is that we really want. And there was even some like people who within our own coalition were not in agreement, right? So some people wanted to make the issue all about justice. It was about equality, and unfortunately, that didn't poll very well. So although for us and for me, right, creating a pathway to college for everybody, regardless of immigration status, is a justice issue. And obviously an education issue, but very much a human rights issue, that wasn't swaying our legislators. And it wasn't swaying the business community. So we had to frame it around economics, which for some of us, me included, I had kind of a hard time, right? When we're talking about people here, we're not just talking about dollar signs. But we had to learn how to play both in order to build the kind of coalition that was needed to pass the final bill that we had. And fíjate that even though the bill failed last year, we have COF this year, right? So now our students are not only able to get an in-state rate, they're able to get $64 a credit hour, which for a full-time student could be about $1,500 a year. Something that they wouldn't have had in other bills. So what happened throughout our coalition is that although there was disagreements, we had to find those points of unity where we felt comfortable saying, okay, yes, we're going to go to this constituency and talk about the message in this way. Then we're going to go to the business community and all those Aspen, Vail, right, bigwigs who play a role too, right? And we're going to message it to them in a different way. And fortunately, what was happening over the years is that we built so good of a communications platform and a messaging strategy that we got faith leaders to the table. We got pastors and imams and rabbis who were able to stand up and talk about this issue, even though maybe they themselves were not undocumented themselves, right? But they were able to talk about how this issue would affect their constituents and their community. We had students themselves saying, I'm not going to tell people that I'm here because my parents are criminals. That was one of the messaging that we didn't agree on. It polled really well to say that students shouldn't be punished for the crimes of their parents, but students were not okay labeling their parents as criminals. So they found a way to tell their story and that how it aligned with our overall messaging. So I'm not going to say it was easy. I'm not going to say it was quick. Right? I'm not going to say it wasn't painful. But in the end, it took all these multiple different voices, advocates, legal people, we needed politicians at the table, we needed business folk, we needed clergy, we needed students, we needed advocates, teachers and counselors from the education perspective, higher ed institutions, all collectively saying the same thing. We need this piece of legislation. And that was the only way that we were able to get it passed.
Colorado, a few years ago, I was appointed to be the only student on Colorado State Council for Educator Effectiveness. How many people are familiar with Senate Bill 191? Anyone? Okay. For those who don't know, it passed in 2010, and it is Colorado's Teacher Effectiveness, Educator Effectiveness Bill. And it's said to be, one of the most controversial bills in education reform, and the creator is actually the same Senator Mike Johnston, who proposed the Amendment 66. And during Race to the Top, a lot of our students from Project Voice were at the work group meetings to try to get some of the Race to the Top dollars. And our students were the only students in any of those work group meetings. And because of that, right after that, when Senate Bill 191 passed, what it is we created a complete new statewide evaluation system. And there's new requirements. One major thing in it is that educators and principals will be evaluated now once every year, whereas in the past, teachers were only evaluated once every 3 years, and it was either they were effective or ineffective. And teachers, with tenure, it was really hard to get rid of teachers who may not have been effective. We know that 99% of teachers are not effective, and yet every year, 99% of teachers in Colorado were evaluated effective. And because of that, this bill is now evaluating them every single year, and there's multiple rating scales. And I was appointed to be the only student on that council, and that's something because of the role that our students had in the Race to the Top process. And I appreciate being the only student. That's cool, to say, hey, I'm representing all 840,000 Colorado students. But was that enough? To have one student representing all 840,000 Colorado students, when at the time I had just graduated from high school, I was a brand new single mother, and going to be the first member of my family to go to college. And I was supposed to represent all 840,000 Colorado students. And I took that role, the best as I could. I had people work with me in work groups to develop recommendations that would be the student voice. And one that we proposed was that student perception surveys, which anybody familiar with, certain districts are now doing student perception surveys. And I proposed, before the Bill Gates presented their final reports on the MET project, I recommended that student perception surveys be not strongly encouraged, but required for all districts in Colorado to use some form of student perception surveys. Why wouldn't you ask students what's working in the classroom if those are the ones who are directly impacted? Why is that not something that education does? So that's something we're working to change. Unfortunately, my recommendations were not taken as we wished, and it is strongly encouraged that student perception surveys be tied into districts' evaluation systems. So some are definitely using it. They have one. Colorado Legacy Foundation has created one that different districts can adopt and utilize. However, they're not required to do it. So in that process, there was parents, there was administrators, there were people who, quite frankly, did not support Senate Bill 191, who were still serving on this council, trying to come to common ground with the same issue, that our education system needs to change and our teachers need to be effective, our leaders in the school need to be effective, and we need to have effective ways to identify if they are. And now Colorado, there's a lot of, definitely different viewpoints on the new evaluation system, but it's a step in the right direction. There was student voice representation, there was a student at the table. Even if there wasn't as much as there should be, it's a start towards the right direction. So I agree with what everybody has said here. Colorado is definitely doing a lot of things to move in the right direction. And by having students at the table, by having families at the table, by having everybody who is really directly impacted by the problems at the table is what's really going to create the change.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'll go back a few years with the African American Leadership Forum. There was a point in time where we came to the Minneapolis Public School District and we said there are very clearly some schools in Minneapolis that are knocking it out of the park with African American children. And these are poor kids. You have schools in Minneapolis, just a handful, not many, but a handful of schools where 90% of the kids were African American, 90% of the kids were in poverty, and they were mostly succeeding, and they were outperforming the state, actually. They're outperforming white kids in the state. So we went to the district and we said, okay, so we have these schools in the district right now that we can see is possible. Why can't you replicate what they were doing? Their response to us was, we don't have the same level of autonomy that those schools have. So it's great that they're doing it, but we just don't have the autonomy that they have. We said, cool, so what would it take to get you the level of autonomy that they have? Well, the teacher's contract. They pointed us to the teacher's contract. We said, well, what's the deal with the teacher's contract? Can't you just negotiate the same type of freedoms that they have in the district? It was really a naive question. I just want to be very honest with you. We thought that this is just something that you could go in, you could ask for it, it would be done, it would be quick. What we learned in that, we read the contract was 300 pages long. To give you kind of a comparison, St. Paul, which is the district right next door, theirs was like 80 pages long, and most of the districts were like 52 pages. So this contract over years had been loaded and saddled up with all kinds of every kind of manis and petties for teachers and everything that you can imagine, and it just was not a kid-based contract. We were still very naive in the project, though. We thought we could just go to the teachers union, we'll talk to them, they'll understand that what we want are schools that perform the way that these really great schools are performing, and they'll just give us what we want. Boy, were we surprised when that was not exactly the response that we got from them and whatnot. So we started a campaign called the Contract for Student Achievement, because we felt like no matter what, there needs to be a third voice. We elect the school board to negotiate this contract. They negotiate with the teachers union, and at no point does the community have any input on what should go into that contract. And we looked at that contract. That contract was worth $250 million. It was the largest single investment that the city was making into the instruction of children. And we thought, well, how can you negotiate a contract like that and have no community voice anywhere in the process? That just doesn't make sense. We found out was that the meetings where they even discussed that were definitely considered private. By law, they were supposed to be open, but no one had ever set foot in there to hear what they even talk about, right? So we sent in a couple of annoying people, right? This was our first strategy. So I just got to tell you, annoying people are gold, right? If you have any annoying people in your communities, make friends with them, right? We love annoying people. So we sent annoying people to go in and watch what's going on and start blogging about it and tell the public what they're actually saying. They were saying all kinds of incredible stuff. I'll give you just a couple of gems. One was we wanted from the district for the lowest performing schools to all have a commitment from their teachers that they would stay at least 2 years. The union said no. They said it is a teacher's rite of passage to be able to bid out through seniority of schools so that they can get to better performing kids, right? That was something they actually said in the room. This is something that your community would never hear that because those doors are always secret and closed, right? So when we started reporting out to the community the actual things that they were saying, they also said that, you know, they were having a problem with teachers taking anxiety meds because their kids were so bad, and that they were afraid of the children, right? Just one gym after another, and we kept putting this out to the community. It was gold, annoying people, blogging, right? Just like telling the community everything. So what happened? The teachers threw this into mediation to close the session and to kick the community out so that there would be no community members in there. In our state, when you put something into mediation, the mediator has the right to either close it or to leave it open, and they always close it because they want to go in private and they don't want you to know what is being said in that room. So we lost in that round because then all of a sudden we were kicked out. So we come back to the table, and what we decided to do was tell the community a different story. Because every time we talked about the teacher's contract, that is terribly unsexy. Nobody wanted to get deep onto what the teacher's contract is about. You try and start a conversation about the teacher's contract with anybody, that's gloss over, right? This is boring, right? But it's not boring when you get into the details of this actually determines who teaches in your school, what your school can do, how long the hours can be, whether or not they can replicate best practices or not. So what we did was we went to 15 community-based organizations and said to them, this is the deal. We're not going to talk to you about the teacher's contract. We're going to talk to you about the freedoms that our schools should have. Every school should be able to have a dedicated leader that is able to pick his team. That team should be able to be free from having people bump in and out and disrupting the team. They should be able to have a coherent educational philosophy and be able to set their own day and to actually determine at the site what is best for their kids. When we said that made all the difference in the world. Our community agencies started signing on to the contract for student achievement. I'm getting attacked by a fly up in here. I don't know what is up with that. Right? Flies all over me. I'm taking it personal too. So people started signing on. About 300 community members and elected officials actually signed on, which was considered to be a very provocative thing to do. You just don't challenge this in our city where we come from. So let me fast forward and say we came back around to this year's negotiating cycle, and first we went to the school board and said, now we elect y'all, right? We don't elect the teachers union, but we elect y'all, and you're supposed to be at a table negotiating on our behalf, not their behalf, right? And so what we got out of them was a commitment from the majority of the board that they would negotiate the 5 freedoms that we were looking for. And they're all the ones I just told you about, a dedicated leader, kind of the ability at the site to determine their school day, all that stuff, to determine a coherent educational philosophy, and they agreed. Because by this time, the public pressure had changed. Editorials had been written in the newspapers in our favor. We had met with all the editorial boards. Politicians were starting to flip on them. Things were starting to change. But they still were a bit arrogant. So this time around, they started the negotiations, and they went to close them. They talked about a bunch of stuff, and then they said, now that we're going to start talking about the real stuff, which was killing all of our proposals, they put it into mediation again and about to close it. This time around, we did something a little different. We had a press conference right away. We had the State Baptist Convention president come stand with us, multiple church leaders, black leaders, and Esper, Latanda Gandhi, right? And the day after we had that press conference, we had Esper and others start making phone calls to the union and to the state mediator, annoying people, making annoying phone calls. And if you ask anybody who was making those phone calls, they could hear that the people were annoyed at some point when they were picking up the phone to answer this is something that they would have never expected. They are still open as of right now. Right? Which is amazing because they would have closed this already had it not been for annoying people and annoying Esper participating in this. But we are farther along now I can't give you a clear victory story because we're still a long way to go, but I'm telling you we're so much further along than we were just a couple of years ago. They would have totally blown us off and said the community should have no voice in this had we not done what we did. So, and thank you to Esper, Natasha Gandhi, and all y'all annoying folks that helped us.
Great. I love how you were talking about some of those annoying people, and I'm sure we all can agree that sometimes our parents are some of those annoying people. And you also included James talking about a little bit about the work that you're doing with your parents in your school. So I'm interested to see what do you all think are the most important adjacent social justice issues that educational equality activists like parents and teachers and students should be allies for. I think that's been one of the things throughout this summit. One of the things that we've found to be different this summit than previous summits. Usually we have a lot of folks just in the ed reform space, but this weekend we've had lots of folks from different different social justice issues like Dreamers and things like that. So I'd love to hear what other social justice issues we can be fighting for.
I think Chris hit the nail on the head. Some of the issues that we fight for are a little bit esoteric and a little bit of a mind F. But I, in some ways I think SFIR should change its name. I think it should be Students for Students. There's no one out there fighting for students like SFIR does. And when you go to the table and you negotiate against the union's not at the table for students. The school board members are rarely there for students. So we have a responsibility and a power to be there for students. And so I think going deep, understanding the issues, getting into the weeds of Colorado school finance reform. Our parents didn't know our parents didn't know much about school finance before Thursday night, and they walked out knowing a lot more. And something I loved was what Cliff, one of my favorite parents that we have at the school, Cliff was grilling the woman there from Amendment 66. He said, "Is all this money for K-12, or is this going to other places?" She said, No, Cliff, it's all for K-12. And then he said, "Well, is all that, is money going to go straight to the schools, or is it going to go to the district?" And no, Cliff, it's going to go to the schools. And is all that money going to come with a lot of strings, or is James going to be allowed to do what he wants with it? Which I liked. And she said, no, the principals, we're going to empower leaders, we're going to empower teachers, we're going to empower, more importantly, community to really decide what's going to be most effective for using that money to making a change for kids, because that's what it's all about. So, S for S.
So I come from Together Colorado. That's kind of in my bio. I've recently transitioned out, and as of Monday had resigned. So that's why I now go by my other title with HIA. And our organization works on a variety of different issues. We're working on a Lifelines to Healing campaign right now. I speak as if I'm still there because I've been with them for so long. But Together Colorado, I should say. And the reality is that our families are not only dealing with a broken education system, they're also dealing with lack of access to health care, and they're also dealing with being pulled over because of the color of their skin, or they're also dealing with all of these multitude of different issues. And so that's what Together Colorado really tries to do is, okay, so what are the multitude of different issues that our community cares about, and how can we start to form committees, right, and groups that are working towards those different ends. So we have a healthcare committee, we have the Lifelines to Healing. We did a huge, and still talking as we, man. I'm sorry if I keep doing that. It's inevitable. I'll probably be doing that for a while. Civic engagement, knowing who can vote and how to vote, and the power of the vote and how that's important, right? Civic engagement. They do a lot of healthcare work and immigrant rights. Right? So looking at how now that we have more and more students gaining in-state tuition rates, how do we ensure that when they graduate from college, that they can actually use their degrees, right, in careers and in fields that they've been preparing for and that they enjoy and are passionate about. So we work on, and we understand too, and because I'm able to see and work on these different issues, see the intersects between them. So if you have a sick kid, how are they supposed to sit in the classroom and learn, right? Or if you have your parents who are about to be deported, how are you supposed to concentrate on that exam? So we understand, and I understand, right, how all of these are intersecting and are connecting, and why we encourage our members to work on a variety of different issues. And I say that cautiously, because I think we have to focus our energy as well. The issue of education, oh my gosh, right? We actually work collectively with the teachers' unions, with DCTA, on points of unity and of collaboration, right? So we don't always see, and we work collectively with some of our school board members, And we're involved in doing forums as well to trying to teach our community about what school board even is and what role they play. So, I think, it is important to gain a better understanding about how all these different pieces, how business comes into play, how politics come into play, right? And how all these other pieces affect, right, what we all care about in education.
So Advancement Project, we mostly work in the background in partnership with grassroots partners, and I want to point you all to two, I think some of the most inspiring, amazing groups that are doing a lot of work around education and beyond that here. So is anyone here from North Carolina? NC? All right, so those of you who have been following North Carolina, the Moral Monday Forward Together movement led by Reverend Barber and the North Carolina NAACP, I really highly suggest you all write that down and read about it because it is inspiring. It is the next generation civil rights movement. And if you go to YouTube, look up Reverend William Barber, and he'll talk to you about fusion politics, which is their way of thinking about things, right? And in a nutshell, he does a much better, more eloquent job of talking about it than I am going to right now. But basically, we have to understand all of these struggles that are happening, not just in education, but in healthcare, in the LGBT movement, in the immigration movement, and all the different things that are going on in our country. We are all bound together as one struggle in this. And we have to find commonalities and common ground in which we can come together and become one and put our collective voice forward. And especially identifying the target of who's doing this to us. And in North Carolina, it's very clear that it's the right-wing supermajority in the House and in their Congress that's doing that there, right? So read about Moral Monday, which has been written about a lot, because that is one of the most inspiring sort of social movements that's happening, in which you will see folks from these various fields marching together under one message and banner about this. And then the second group I want to talk about is anyone here from Florida? A couple of folks from Florida. So Advancement Project has really had a great partnership with the Dream Defenders, who have been doing a lot of really great work around education issues as well. But again, look them up and listen to them talk about education, because so the Dream Defenders sort of kind of rose up as a group of college students like y'all in Florida, but really kind of hit a moment with the George Zimmerman verdict, right, and the unjustness of that verdict. But if you look at what is happening with the Dream Defenders, it's not only about the Trayvon verdict at this point, right? It's about the racial injustice that's happened. It's about the lack of youth voice in all of these issues that are happening. It's about the racial profiling that's happening. It really is about like a human rights struggle that's happening right now in Florida, right? And the need for young people like you all to be involved in that issue and to really talk about it. So read about the Dream Defenders and the work that they're doing and how really college-age folks like you all have been leading this voice and this fight, because they have taken this beyond just an education issue, and it is really truly fundamentally a civil rights and human rights issue. And in all of these struggles, I think that's really kind of the point and how we need to be addressing this.
I definitely just want to emphasize some things that have already been mentioned today. One, I'm like being here from Denver, Colorado, what hit closest to home right now. Amendment 66 is huge. We're definitely in support of that because it's helping to change social injustices. Ending unequal funding for schools that definitely need it the most. Right now, currently in DPS, only 30% of third graders are reading at grade level, which means the following years to come are all going to be a struggle for them. They are already entering fourth grade behind, because up till third grade, you learn basic skills that teach you how to read. After third grade, you need to know how to read in order to read the material that you're going to learn, math books, history books. And currently, 46% of our students have dropped out of high school in Colorado. And that is a scary statistic. The achievement gap, it's a sad reality, but, amendments or bills, initiatives like Amendment 66 and organizations that are working to really end some of those injustices, I say, are definitely things to jump on board and support. I know Mile High United Way, or any United Way group, they do amazing work in the communities. Right now, we've actually started a partnership with them and are helping them to campaign some of the initiatives, one being youth success, adult self-sufficiency, things that are impacting people, students, children, adults, anybody no matter where you're from, whether you're from a low-income community or you're not. It's, bringing everyone together to be united to solve problems that nobody should have to face. And so definitely being aware of things that locally that are impacting you, but also in different places. It's definitely a good experience to reach out to those people and see any way that you could partner or work with them to collaborate on sharing or improving some of your initiatives. So.
Great. So kind of as a final question for me before we open it up to students, just quick rapid fire, 1 minute, we'll go down the line. If you could give one piece of advice to our student leaders, what would it be in going forth with this movement?
Don't stop caring. I don't know how many times I hear adults say that kids don't care, right? It's BS. So don't stop caring.
A little bit on the last question. What policies are we out there that we should be supporting? I think we need to think a little bit less about policies and specific things. I mean, those are obviously important and keep fighting for those, but we need to change the story. Right now, the story about our kids and our community is not a story that speaks to who they are, to how powerful they are, and to how powerful our parents are. The story that's being told about our kids on the Colorado the House floor, when Senate Bill 191 was being passed, a House member got up and said, "You wouldn't hold a baker accountable if his flour is full of maggots." He compared on the floor of the Colorado House our kids to maggots. We need to change the story. Our families and our kids have powerful stories, and something I didn't realize that I wish I had known is that my story is powerful and your story is powerful, and the amount of access that you have to people, to school board members, to legislatures is incredibly powerful. When I was a teacher, Mike Johnston's chief of staff asked me to come testify for 191, which is where I heard the maggot reference, and I said, "You don't want me. I'm a second-year teacher. I'm thinking about this crazy stuff with starting a school. I'm nobody. No one wants to meet with me." And he said, "If you don't come down here and tell the story of your kids, then no one else will." And so that's why I went down, and that's what you all need to do.
What I would tell you all is that just really to make your thinking as sophisticated as possible on this issue. As you heard me talk about, we work primarily on a school-to-prison pipeline, and really when we talk about that, that's not just about, try to unpack that a little bit, right? The school-to-prison pipeline is also about private prisons wanting to profit off of our children. It's about the systemic racism that still exists in the various institutions that are out there. It's about these policies and practices that have trickled down from all these zero-tolerance rules that happen, actually a lot from what happened here in Columbine in the 1990s that came into our schools. It's about us actually not investing in teachers, in giving them the resources they need to support our students. It's also about not investing in public education. Those of you from Chicago, Philadelphia, DC, you know that they're closing down our public schools, right? And so suddenly we're moving to this privatization movement. What is that about? Really to break down and unpack everything that's happening, because I think when you do, we can discover that it all comes from one source, and we need to really roll it back and think about what's important, which is our young people, giving them what they need, our communities, making sure we invest in them, and making sure that the whole child is educated in our schools.
I would say definitely first continue to cultivate your own leadership, but as well create new leaders. And that's something that my organization really works hard to do, is we recruit emerging leaders, people who are on the outskirts, people who are disengaged students like I was once, or dropping out of school, or really have no type of support from home. Create new leaders out of those people, because those are the ones who really are impacted the most, and those are the ones who have the most grit and will take it as far as possible. And in that process, I'd say, anybody who knows the 4 agreements? Anyone? 4 agreements, if you don't know it, definitely read that book. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz. And I'd say demonstrate these 4 agreements, but also spread them, spread the awareness of it, and teach people to try to live by them, which is be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. And if that's something that every single person tried to possess and utilized, this world we live in would definitely be in a much better state. So, pass it on.
That was hot. I like that. I don't know that I want to follow that. So, you know, at the start of this, I would say think critically. Dig into the issues and think very critically about them. This thing about the privatization, I just have a little different spin on that, is the publicization has not worked out for us either, right? So public prisons are not a good thing either, and there are people profiting off of those too. I want to be very clear. When we tried to reform prisons in California, it was the public unions of prison officers that actually stood in the way of reform of California prison. So don't get fooled on this. And the public schools in Chicago, many of them should be shut down. They weren't designed for us or by us or with us in mind, and people have been profiting. Chicago public school teachers send their kids to private schools at 4 times the rate of the public. This is something we need to think through when we get this privatization message. So be shrewd consumers of all this message, because this school reform argument is very much a white-on-white crime argument, and as people of color, many of us have to stand back and be shrewd consumers of all the players, because they all have something to gain in it, and we are not always the ones that are winning that discussion. The last thing I will say is there's a database of schools in the United States that are getting it right with our kids. They're teaching poor kids, kids of color. There's 2,500 schools I could point you to where you can see it actually happening. I want you to know that if it's not happening for all kids, I would just ask you to fight like hell until every kid actually gets that. And keep asking the question. It is possible, it's not happening, why? And then fight like hell to get an answer to that question.
I love that. Thanks. Before we open it up for questions, I would love if you all could do some spirit fingers for our panelists. But before you do your spirit fingers, I want to shout out Jade over here, who taught me a little something in one of our sessions earlier. What they do in their state coalition is they do spirit fingers and they say soulmates. And I think all of these folks are soulmates in this movement. So on the count of 3, we'll do spirit fingers and we'll all yell soulmates. So 1, 2, 3. Soulmates. Nice. All right, so let's open it up to questions. Joe? Oh gosh, okay, I have the job of summarizing the question. So you were asking if things like national standards like the Common Core, performance pay or high stakes testing, are those kind of some of the solutions that we're looking for? Is it a combination of those? Do any of those stand out to you, or is there something else?
So I'm going to just take a quick stab at this and then hand it to the educator there who's actually working on a school and just say that each one of those is so different that you can unpack them differently. Like the Common Core would be one thing you can unpack differently than merit pay and a couple of these other ones. So I will just say this much. Nationally, we need to know how kids are doing across the board. We need some sort of standard that can actually be measured from Mississippi to Minnesota, from the West Coast to the East Coast, to just know how our kids are doing. We need our kids to be reading in 3rd grade. We need them to be kind of numerate in 8th grade. We need them to graduate from high school. But we need some sort of standard that lets us know that across the board. Common Core might be it, may not be it, but I'm just saying that's one issue. The merit pay and all those other things, I'm actually a person who believes we need many different types of schools. We don't need this kind of like communist uniform, do one thing, one size fits all for everybody thing across the whole country in merit pay and all that. Let me set my pay and let this guy set his pay and let us have at it for talent.
Quick clarifying question. Is it jazz hands or spirit fingers?
Spirit fingers.
Okay, got it.
Whatever you're feeling. Just kinda go with the flow, you know?
I hope I won't be bastardized for my jazz hands earlier. I would agree with Chris. I think that out of those, I'm most excited about Common Core. The anti-Common Core argument is that it raises the bar too much and expects too much from our kids. And when that's the argument against, then I'm like, sweet, yeah, we need to do that. The other piece is merit pay. I believe it's important for our school. I also agree with Chris, right? We need to empower leaders to run their schools the way that they see fit and let them compete for talent. So I know you guys heard from Chris Gibbons. If I had $1 for every time we were going after the same teacher and trying to, okay, what's Chris offering you? Then I'd be slightly wealthier than I am. But it hasn't been shown to move the needle in a dramatic way. And standardized testings is only as good as the caliber of the test. So I'm extremely excited about having some rigorous assessments that are tied to Common Core that I can compare a teaching candidate's kids from DC and compare that to how our kids are doing and how our teachers are doing, and also compare our kids to kids in DC and make sure that we have a common assessment. So yes, if I send a kid over to DC, I can feel confident that they're getting a quality education, or no, if I'm not moving the needle enough.
The only thing I would add to that is I agree in that we need a diverse option, right, to choose from for our parents and our families. So if a student who's really gifted in the arts may not do well at a science and technology school, they may and may not, right? So not only having these options in our local community. We're sitting in a DSST school here, right? But also being able to engage parents and families in those discussions. And parents, I would say, at an elementary, kind of into middle school level, and then, let's be real, the students themselves in middle school and high school level. Right? That even though we create these policy changes and create these options, our families are not going to be able to access them if we're not also, in conjunction with policy, right, doing the grassroots organizing work to help train our community members on how to access those resources and choose what's right for them.
And I agree with that, but right now, it's not the flavors of schools that are the issue, it's the quality of schools. For every 10 schools that are out there, despite the flavor of arts or tech or computers or whatever, only one of them in Denver is getting it done in terms of quality. And so parents are seeking those out, like DSST, like Strive Prep, and like Rocky Mountain Prep. And so the flavors right now, I think it's a great ideal to go for, but right now we have to fix the quality problem.
So I specifically want to address high-stakes testing in regard to the school-to-prison pipeline, because basically high-stakes testing has helped create the school-to-prison pipeline. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's a good idea. I think it's a horrible idea. And really, what we see is that teachers, as you guys have heard, start teaching to the test, right? And students are not getting the kind of rounded education that they need. Teachers are really stressed about, wanting to meet up to these various standards and measures of their supposed success and how they're teaching their students. And it's really been creating a huge problem. And what we see, at least from the school-to-prison pipeline field, is that these tests, what they do is they make teachers really stressed, and as a result, teachers have no recourse but to use zero-tolerance policies to push students out. And therefore, those students lose that part of the education. I think one way I want to connect this for you all, part of what I'm telling you to make your thinking more sophisticated on this, is what the role of charter school is with high-stakes testing, right? Because a lot of what charter schools are built on is the fact that, we are scoring much better on these tests than public schools are doing in many of these communities, right? But if we really unpack what's happening there, what happens is that once these schools are doing these tests, they see the students who are not performing. What happens is they push them out, and they end up in the school-to-prison pipeline. They'll go down to the public school, and that's what's going to happen down there, right? And so this is what we see in a lot of communities, and I know folks up here will disagree with me, but this is what we've been working on this issue for 10 years that we see is happening, right? And so we need to think, I agree that we need to think of ways to assess our students in a very well-rounded way, but high-stakes testing is really perpetuating that school-to-prison pipeline that we work on, and it really is a big problem.
Ooh, so this is going to be some fire on the panel. So what we'll do some fire, yeah. What we'll do is Chris, I'll let you kind of have a comment really quickly. And James, also a very quick, brief comment so that we can get to another question, but love the discourse.
So forget everything you just heard. My quick comment. Right. Okay, so look this up, right? I want my child to pass the test. And the thing that will make that happen is good instruction and good teaching. Tests only make you narrow your teaching and your curriculum if you are not good enough to get a child above proficiency, right? The tests are not testing for mastery. They're testing whether the kid is numerate and whether they are literate. And I am sorry, just because you have melanin and low income does not mean that you cannot pass one of these tests. We have got to get this narrative out of our head. We cannot keep talking about this. Now let me talk about this push-out thing, because I was on the Minneapolis school board, right? I sat on the traditional district school board. They invented push-out. Charter schools didn't invent push-out. As a matter of fact, the charter schools in our city are the ones collecting all the kids that we push out of the mainline district. You know how they get there? We have principals in our district driving kids right before test time to charter schools and this other thing that they've had for years called alternative learning centers. They have perfected push-outs. Do you have alternative learning centers in any of your cities? Do you know how the kids get there? They get there through the traditional district. This narrative around charter schools and testing being the cause of it, there's one thing that suspends kids: teachers, okay? That's what suspends teachers. To pretend like it's the charter school and it's anything else making that happen, there's this wild, crazy narrative that is coming from unionists, and it is not in our favor as people of color to buy into this nonsense.
So I get my couple punches too.
Brief couple
Very
punches.
brief. We lost 4 kids last year, and all 4 moved, and it was non-optional. And we're a charter school. On average, the schools in our communities lost 25% of their kids. And so you have to compare apples to apples when you talk about retention. I'm not going to go argue for every single charter school, or I don't think charter schools are a panacea. I don't think district schools are a panacea. I don't think innovation schools in Denver are a panacea. I think great schools and great education is a panacea, and I don't care how that's happening, but it needs to happen, and everyone needs to fight for it. The second thing is, my wife's a doctor, and I have never, ever heard her come home and say, that MRI machine is causing every single problem in our medical system. Assessments help us understand what kids need and how to support them and how to help them, just as assessments in medicine help understand what's going on and how to support and how to heal and help.
Great. Yeah.
They also have a quote, and Andre Perry says this a lot, but we can't continue to raise the standards on what we want our kids to learn and lower the standards on who we have teaching them. I don't think that's fair. The second, I said that, Oh, I'm sorry. I said that Andre Perry, he's from New Orleans, teaches at Tulane. He says a lot that we can't continue to raise the standards on what we want our kids to learn and lower the standards on who we have teaching them. I also said that, he said that his wife is a doctor, but I wouldn't want anybody operating on me that went to medical school for 5 weeks. That's just, and then the other thing, they talked a lot about teachers choosing where they want to go. And you know, they say they don't want lower performing schools, but education is a business until teachers treat it like a business. And I don't think that's fair. They shouldn't, what did I say? I said education is a business until teachers treat it like a business. Teachers shouldn't want to go to better schools with more resources. They shouldn't want more pay. But education is still a business when it comes to us. iron sharpens iron with our schools and the charter schools and the direct run schools. They're supposed to be sharpening each other, but there should be no competition as far as teachers are concerned. If I want to go to better school as a teacher, I feel like if I have to pay my bills, that should be my right, and we shouldn't penalize or punish or look down on people. That was what I heard coming from the panel, and I want y'all to really think about that and the way that you talk about your teachers and your teachers' unions, because that's what's going to teach your kids. And the actual instruction that's going on in the classroom is going to come from them and not from people, no politicians, none of us, except for, the ones of us that are going to education, we aren't going to be the ones to make those changes. So we really do need to think about the gains that we want to make. They're going to come from inside the classroom, so we can't talk down about the people that are going to make those changes.
I just want to reiterate, and that was one of the reasons why I mentioned, right, is that the DCTA has actually been a partner with Together Colorado for a number of years, right? The teachers union has actually been one of our partners. And I agree, I've met so many best-intentioned, great people who want to be teachers. Students who, like me, right, first-generation Latinas, born and raised in Denver, who were wanting to go back and teach, right, because we know how effed up the system is and we want to try to make a difference. So I agree, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you this is what we need to fix every single school in our country. I think this debate on education, just like we're having here back and forth, is great and needs to happen more often at the local level. So continue, like one of my fellow panelists said, is to think critically, right? Think critically about what's happening in your city, in your schools, in your community, in order to figure out what's going to work best. And I absolutely see our teachers as great resources and potential allies, not potential, allies in this fight too.
Amen. So I assume the 5 weeks comment was a bash on TFA. And I think I'm betrayed in my bio in the packet that I was part of Teach for America, and that's how I got into teaching, and that's how I became a teacher, and I'm very proud of that. Teach for America is not the right entree into teaching for everyone, and I agree with you. I think that 5 weeks is not enough time to be trained. But when we look at the most rigorous study of how does Teach for America perform against all the other teacher pipelines, there's a Mathematica study released, I think 3 months ago, that showed that Teach for America teachers receive 2.6 months more gains in math every single year than compared to all the traditional peers. And so if that's happening with 5 weeks of training, what's going on in the schools of ed that they have 4 years to teach people and get them ready to be successful, and they're getting outperformed by folks that only get 5 weeks of training? I think that's a problem. In our school, what we do, we don't hire TFA core members to be first-year teachers, because I agree with you. I don't think that a first-year teacher, I was not ready to be what my kids deserved in my first 6 months of teaching. Luckily, I was able to figure it out and I got there, but that's not the case for all of my colleagues, and I know that, and I'll be the first to admit that. The TFA is not perfect. I'm not an evangelical. That being said, I do think that they've done more to make the teaching profession sexy for all of y'all and all the college graduates when I was coming out than any other organization, and I think that's a great thing because I love teachers, and I am a teacher, and I consider myself a teacher, and I'm really proud of that. When we opened our school, we had over 1,800 applicants for 14 teaching positions for our school, and there is an amazing desire for folks to work in high-performing schools and organizations, to work for a team that's on the same page, and to work with really high-caliber colleagues. I think about what if every single low-income school was an amazing place to work, was just as amazing as Google or Facebook or all these other really cool places where you get great perks and you work with great smart people. That's what we all want to do, and that's what we need to transform. And so what we do with our new folks coming in and our TFA core members or other first years is we put them through a fellowship, which is based on the medical residency model, and they get twice a week professional development targeted to them. They get twice a week observations. They get coaching and feedback sessions at least twice a week. They can get more if they want. And it's a gradual release of responsibility to give them the skills they need to be one of the best teachers in the country, which is what our kids deserve.
I would just like to again speak on the fact that the people who are really being directed or affected by these problems are not at the table. And I think that's more important than whether it's TFA teachers teaching them, teachers. I'm currently at Metro State University in an education program that gets some, definitely good recognition, but at the same time, some of my classes are a joke. Like, honestly, they're not necessarily teaching me in a 4-year program how to become an effective teacher. Whereas my organization, where it's students teaching other teachers, TFA is the only group of teachers in Denver that has currently had us come back multiple times, 4 times a year at least, to to have our students train them on how to connect with their students and how to build better relationships. And the teachers in programs who have master's degree or who are in our schools with master's degrees aren't asking us to do that. And our school board here in Colorado, how many people out here are familiar and know if their school board has a student on their school board who is a voting member? Why? Like, why is that the case? Why did nobody raise it? Why is that fair? Like, how are these decisions being made by people but not with the people who it's directly impacting? And I'd say that's the bigger issue that really needs to be addressed.
I love that we can end on that note, on really talking about how students should be the ones at the table. Of course, that's what we're all about, and that's why we're here. What I'd love to do to thank our guests, I think each and every single panelist really illustrated all of our core values. So if you all, on the count of 3, once again, could yell out the core value that you think that these folks illustrated best, that'd be great. So on the count of 3, yell out a core value. We'll give them a round of applause to thank them. 1, 2, 3. Love it. Thank you all so much.
Blind in the eye, so I see it with my heart. To me, all of y'all look exactly the same. Fear, faith, compassion, and pain. I started rhyming just to be somebody. I found out that I already was. 'Cause can't nobody be free unless we're all free. There's no me and no you, it's just us. Street preacher, what a fan once called me. I've been called worse and tried to live up. Hope you don't mind a few more stories. I swear to God, y'all, I tell them with love.